Thank you for joining us for our Messiah Minutes this week. A few announcements before we get started. Our stockings of love, since we didn't have service Sunday, they are due back by this Friday, so please bring those gifts in this week. Mondays, the Single Ladies Bible Study. Actually, I think they're taking a break until February 4th. So their last one was last night, and then they're going to return on February 4th. Tonight we have the Men's Bible Study at 6, Life Recovery Group at 6:30. And then tomorrow night we have youth at 6. We are still signing up for meals. So if you can do that online or sign up at the welcome desk, that would be great. And then we have our adult midweek service tomorrow at 6:30. This Sunday morning is the 4th week of Advent where we celebrate love. So please join us Sunday morning. We're also going to do our Christ birthday offering this Sunday. It is also Dress Your Best Sunday. So if you want to wear a tuxedo to church, do it. Be excited to see you. Our Family Worship Sunday is also this Sunday, so there's not going to be any NTP kids or youth classes. We're all going to be in here in the sanctuary. And we also are having a Christmas Eve service here at the church on the 24th. So please join us for that, and that starts at 6 p.m. So in this Messiah Minutes, we've been focusing on 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. And we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So last week we talked a little bit about perspective and how we can kind of change the way we look at things by searching for fruit instead of the foul, for searching for what's good instead of for what's bad. We can be grateful for what we have and for what the Lord has done instead of being disappointed in what we don't have. And we talked about Philippians 4:8. It says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. We are told to think about these things. Are we going to think of other things? Yeah, of course we will. But we need to be able to quickly transition back to those things so we can choose to live our lives through this lens of faith instead of fear, right? That we talked about. We can start looking at the big picture of things instead of focusing on the problem right in front of us. So I challenged you last week to start thinking about what you're actually looking for in life. What are you focusing on? So this week I want to talk a little bit more about what we listen to, because we talked before. It's been a few months, I think, but we talked about what goes in is what's going to come out. So what we listen to kind of has a way of shaping our perspective as well, right? So we saw in the story we've been studying, right? In the story, the 10 spies give this negative, fear-filled report, this account of the land, right? And 2 instead offer this faith-filled report that's positive and optimistic. So the question is, who do you listen to? Because the Israelites had a choice to make too. They had a choice who they were going to listen to. Did they listen to the 10 or did they listen to the 2? And who do we tend to listen to? Do we maybe have that same ratio in our life? Do we usually have maybe a couple people in our life that are optimistic and faith-filled and look at the good side of things, but the majority of them are negative? The majority of them point out everything that's wrong, talk about things that are negative, and they have this ability to just kind of throw doubt everywhere and kind of choose to look at every situation negatively. I think if you think about it, that's probably a pretty fair ratio for us as well, 10 to 2. 10 negative, 2 positive. But that presents a real problem to us. It means we have to really be intentional about who we listen to. I said it before, but it's important enough that I'm going to say it again. If you are someone that's a constant news feed, social media scrolling person, then it's going to be very, very hard for you to hold your thoughts captive because you have no peace. You are definitely not thinking about what is true, what is pure, what is lovely, what is noble, what is praiseworthy. If you spend your time with negative people, critical people, friends that love to constantly gossip, tear other people down, then you're not really helping yourself focus on the right things. You're not focusing on things that are admirable, lovely, and excellent. I want you to think about that story. Who did the Israelites choose to listen to? Did they choose to listen to the 10 or the 2? And I'm not naive. I think the ratio probably had something to do with it. If there were 10 of the spies that came back with this positive, faith-filled perspective, then maybe things would have gone differently. The problem is, if we share that same ratio with the people around us in our lives, it's going to be very difficult for us to hear and trust the two that are faithful, the two that are fearless, the two positive inputs that we have. We're very likely to have our thoughts influenced just like the Israelites did. And that's not really good to know if you know the rest of the story. Because the Israelites listened to the 10 instead of the 2. And because of that, they wander in the wilderness for 40 more years. Numbers 14:34 says, "For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins and know what it is like to have me against you." And then who of that generation actually gets to enter the promised land? There's only 2. And you already know them. We've talked about them. Joshua and Caleb. So who do you listen to? I don't want you to miss this, because Caleb and Joshua, they didn't get to skip the consequences. They had to wander for 40 years too. Even though they had been faithful, they had been righteous to the Lord, Caleb and Joshua still had to face the consequences of waiting 40 years in the wilderness alongside their community. But yet somehow they kept their faith. They kept their integrity. They waited patiently. They served their brothers and continued to believe that God was going to do what he promised. Joshua and Caleb will get to be part of conquering the promised land, yet they still have to wander the 40 years with the rest of that generation. And that makes me kind of melancholy to think about it, I'll be honest. The Lord recognizes this spirit that rests on Joshua and on Caleb. Yet they still have to wander with those who lacked faith before they receive their promise. And I think about that. It makes me think of Galatians 6:9. It says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." So I started thinking about that. How often have we stopped short of the promise? How often have we decided it's been too long? I've been faithful and it's been too long. God must have forgotten his promise he made to me. But yet Joshua and Caleb were still part of taking the promised land. They had to wait 40 years because of the lack of faith of those people around them. So today, my prayer for myself and for you is that we live with this kind of spirit, the spirit that Joshua and Caleb did. I want to live with that different, wholehearted spirit that doesn't give up. And I want to bring people with me so that we don't have to wander because of lack of faith. So my prayer is that today we live with that spirit that Caleb and Joshua had, to love people, to love God wholeheartedly and put him ahead of people, to walk with that different spirit. So I pray that God helps us to have that and to listen to faith-filled perspectives that are in our lives, because it's so much more negative than it is positive. I pray that he helps us to remain in him, because when we do that, he will remain in us. He promises that. So help us to be more cognizant of the ratios that are present in our lives, and help us to fight against the 10 negatives. And help us to recognize the 2 positives. And help us to stand up for those and support and believe in those, because his promises are everlasting. I think it's very easy for us to give up, especially when everything's negative. But Joshua and Caleb show us that we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to believe, even when things don't go our way, that the promise is still coming. And in the proper time, we will reap that harvest. So I pray that for you. I thank you for joining us today. I pray that you just stay focused on the good. And just stop worrying about the bad, because God's going to work it out. Have faith in that. I love you guys. I thank you. Hope to see you this week.